is legit. He's not just pulling it out of the book. He knows what he's talking about. And I want to prove that the farm I worked at over the summer is APES. When I got off of it and I started reading back over APES, I saw it everywhere. It ties in constantly. So how I got there in the beginning was actually thanks to Mr. Vaughn. He's awesome. And then he got me into ag camp and then back onto the farm. And I spent 2.5 months there over the summer, kind of working through it. I was lead livestock tour person for about 2 months. And that was kind of my daily duties, is water, fencing, that kind of stuff. And this is actually the market garden, believe it or not. It's not just weeds. It's about an acre on the farm. They have a hoop house. It's probably 3,000 square feet of space. And that kind of helps them extend their season. And it's very grassy. I don't know if you noticed, but over here, this is where we have to walk to actually harvest the tomatoes and cucumbers and whatnot. But he planted the grass there so that it will contain the soil and kind of help recuperate it and prevent runoff. And so it's all very holistic. He doesn't do pesticides or fertilizers or any of that. And it actually makes it a bit more vulnerable to the environment. There's lots of diseases that can go on and lots of insects that can get into it. But the alternative is far worse. They throw pesticides at it like you would not believe. And then it runs off as organic waste, as a hazardous organic waste material into waterways. If we did the same kind of thing that like an industrial farm would do, it would come down this hill, which is where we run lamb and chickens and cattle. It would continue going and it would mess up all of the grass, and many of these chickens would become sick because they would consume the pesticides and fertilizers. And then eventually it would make its way into the lake at the very bottom of the hill, and you would get these explosions of algae, and it would consume all of the oxygen in the pond, kill all of the fish. I caught a couple bass in there. It would wipe them out. There would be no frogs. Much of these trees would just become infested with disease and would lose its water material. And so it would just destroy the entire environment. It'd be terrible. So these are the chickens. That's kind of one of my main jobs on the farm, is taking care of the 300 plus chickens. There's 2 different chicken coops. This is where they lay their eggs on 2 different spots in the farm. And those are managed every like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's moved to a different paddock so that the high nitrogen content of their manure can be reincorporated into the soil and kind of rebuild the environment after they've dug it up and gotten all the worms and disease out of it. And so they too are treated holistically. There's not any, I don't know, you don't see many people feeding chickens. But it can look like this. They put them, a couple thousand, hundreds of thousands of chickens in these long runs with a fan at one end and a fan at the other. And that's the only air circulation that they have. And so you get, obviously, from 100,000 chickens, many of them are going to die. And so they're going to rot, and they're going to be diseased, and the monoxide and carbon dioxide and methane from their urine and their farts will kind of build up in the building, and it doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of festers. And so the people who work there have lung disease, and it spreads quite a bit of the chicken disease that they have, there's been a few outbreaks due to it. So thankfully, that's not what we do. Now, let's say that the manure that's scooped out of those coops every 1 to 2 years when the chickens are shipped off in mass quantities, that has to go somewhere. Take a gander where? Right into a lake or stream. It's everywhere and it's prevalent all in the U.S. It's really an epidemic. This is the barn on the farm, and most of the time, the farmer would keep their pesticides and fertilizers. This is a concentration of nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and then they would spread that onto the fields I talked about earlier. Not at Pickle Creek. That's where we have the chicks and the ducklings, and they're kind of brooded and harvested, but kept there, and they're grown into the pullets where they go out onto the field. There's 2 or 3 different coops of it. They have plenty of space. I think this one is holding about 100 chicks, which is far more than they need. But let's say the fertilizer is kept there, and then it is spread out onto the fields as a fossil fuel. It becomes a primary pollutant. The runoff that, again, goes into the lakes and streams is hazardous. It is hazardous. If you consume it, if an animal consumes it, they will die. It's just not safe, and it's not a correct practice. Another one of the livestock on the farm were the pigs. This is where the pigs can kind of fallow and make babies. These are newborn piglets. They were born about an hour before I took that picture. And so they've got their huts and plenty of space. It goes back here for about 2 acres, and they can kind of roam around and be pigs, and they've got shelter. But not all the time. Again, in an industrial system, when a sow has its piglets, they're kept completely separate, and they don't have any interaction. And the reason for that is because these big mamas, they roll around, and they can lay on their piglets and kill them. That's what they do, and it's terrible. But you kind of have to make the moral decision of which is better, a cage or freedom and a possible natural death. Now, when those piglets grow up, they're moved into larger paddocks in about 6 to 8 sections, and they're moved around every couple weeks so that the rooting that they do in the soil can kind of rest, and some of the root systems can get reincorporated. And some of the barley that's planted can kind of grow back up. And then they're taken off for slaughter, and they make excellent kielbasa. Putting that out there. So they should be piggy. They should be in the woods, and they should be allowed to roam. But it feels like I'm a broken record. It's not always like that. They're put in these houses very much like the chickens. And you've got sick building syndrome and indoor pollution, and it's terrible. And the methane produced and the carbon dioxide produced is like 40, 30, I think 30% of carbon dioxide waste produced by humans. Like, yes, vehicles are a good part of that, but these large CAFOs are an even greater portion. So hopefully what I was able to show you is that a farm is more than the sum of its parts. It's more than what we know. It's so detailed and it's so specific that we can never really get it to where it should be, so we have to make compromises. But the compromises made by the industrial system is never going to be enough. And so we have to keep pushing the boundaries and trying to figure out what it should be to be truly sustainable. Are there any questions? Cool. Thank you.
Hold on a second. I have one question first. Can you explain to them what a CAFO is? What does that mean?
Concentrated animal feeding operation. Concentrated. You've got 10 pigs in this single little cell rather than 8 pigs in 3 acres. And it's most of the time it's in concrete, and they get their feed from a bucket that goes along here, and their water is a drip system. But that's the general idea of the CAFO.
Ernest, did you have a question?
You said it was concentrated animal feeding.
Operators.
So, you said there are 8 pigs for 3 acres. So how many pigs are on the farm compared to the industrial? It's like 1/9, 1/3.
Yeah, it's not even close. Like all of the pigs on the farm that are raised at a time for harvest is about 40, and 1, 2, 3, that's 40. So it's a lot wider of a land base.
So, is the natural process of letting the animals on this land, is that cost more or less?
Yes. The product is more expensive because it's more intensive, and you can't cram as many into a single space. And then another good part of it is the feed that's given to them. At Pickle Creek, it's all organic, and that again is more expensive, and that increases the cost. And they're kind of allowed to get more consistent grain. So yes, it is more expensive.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
What is the total fertility rate of each pig?
So they can have babies about 3 times a year, an average of like 8 piglets. So pretty high. They breed like rabbits.
All right, so you said you don't use pesticides on the farm.
Yeah.
How did you keep the crops safe from insects and other dangers that could enter it?
The biggest factor there is the breed of the crop. There was a tomato plant and some cucumber plants that my boss was talking to me about. Let me get there. Yeah. So we kind of did an experiment. This was one row of cucumber, and that was one breed. And then this was another row of cucumber, and that was another breed. And in about 2 months, there was a significant difference in harvest rate, as well as the quality of the product. There was one breed that very rarely had disease and not many insects got into it, and then another, it was just infested. So the biggest difference is breed, and then there's some IPM management. Ms. King may have talked to you about that, integrated pest management. Some brackets of that are incorporated together.
So, do you use minerals in your genetic discussion?
Yes, definitely. Less so in the garden. They were using the ducks as kind of like a chicken on a different part of the farm. There's a different garden. But they brought in the ducks for, I think it was 3 months to get into a specific area of the garden that was having an issue with disease and many insects. And so they would kind of forage and consume those and kind of sterilize it. That's what chickens and ducks are. They're a sterilizer for the environment. So yes, less so the products and more so how they eat.
And can plants experience the same problems as opposed to
It depends on the crop. Like you can grow lettuce right next to each other. Many times they're touching each other, and you can almost never get to the bottom of it. But corn, for example, has to have the specific row spacing between each crop. So again, it's breeding the crop.
Any other questions? All right, give him a hand. Thank you very much.